So yes, and there we go. We just started. So welcome everyone. Thank you again for attending our Internet 2 Net Plus with Google for Education webinar series. So this is the first webinar that we're actually kicking off this series with, where we're going to be covering license management and then deployment of the paid licensing. So I know that that's one of the top kind of sought after questions that a lot of individuals had with how do you actually roll out licenses, how will you actually manage this in the real world. So we wanted to at least provide this forum to kind of showcase what that actually will look like from a demonstration perspective and all the different options you have, and then dive in with Virginia Commonwealth University to hear how they're actually going through that. And then we'll close out with a significant Q&A portion as well, to where you can ask us some questions that you potentially have from a technical perspective, or potentially target some questions towards the VCU folks just to hear how they're actually going about this. So I think the first thing that we just want to do here is review the agenda. So again, as I said, a lot of these pieces are going to dive into the demo of the provisioning options and hearing from VCU, and then also having a Q&A. But we're going to kick things off initially with the Internet 2 Net Plus program overview that one of our kind of co-hosts actually created, and it will be running through Tara. So Tara, I'll pass it over to you, and then I can advance the slides as you need.
Great. Thank you, Leighton, and thanks to the Google team for coming up with this curriculum that we have for our webinar series. I think it's going to help certainly the Internet 2 members and the higher education community adapt and kind of get ready for the exciting things coming up in the Google Workspace for Education area. So I'm Tara Jennis, and I work closely with Dana Voss, who's our program manager for the Google Workspace for Education program, and she worked diligently with the Google team and with our higher education service evaluation members to get this program to where it is for the community to take advantage of the new Google Workspace for Education. Next slide. I'm going to just give a real quick introduction to the highlights of the program, but really what you want to do is go to our Google Workspace for Education wiki page. The link is there, and I'll put it into the chat after I've finished speaking, so that you can look up more details about the program. And you can always reach Dana or I at netplus@internet2.edu. Next slide. So when we say that it's a Net Plus program, it really means a lot. It's gone through a rigorous service evaluation and all these different areas of a service offering. The functional assessment, which can be the fun stuff, the tools and how it works, but important things like the technical integration, security and compliance that's maybe unique to the higher education environment. Obviously the business requirements, the contracts that we put together for the program, and then what we'll be talking about today, the deployment side and how it's supported ongoing. Next slide. So this particular program, is really part of the overall Net Plus program. We have 23 offerings right now in the portfolio. And the objective really for our higher ed community is to make it easier for you to contract with a service provider, reduce your time because the contract negotiations are predetermined, and reduce your cost in doing that, and create an environment that makes it easier to adopt this technology, and reduce the risk by capturing all those important compliance legal areas for the program. Next slide. And the history behind this Google Workspace for Education service evaluation couldn't have happened without these members of the service evaluation group that worked for almost a year to get to this point. And we really appreciate the volunteers that worked closely with us and with Google to make this possible. Some of which are on the call, some will be presenters later in the webinar series, but thank you again to everyone who contributed to this effort. And the next slide, we'll see not only was it the service evaluation, but when we came to the point in the negotiations where there were some changes going on, we actually got more members from the community involved. There were about 30 different institutions that worked between December and June to get to the final agreement, mainly on the commercial terms. And so a lot of people to really appreciate that we're here where we are now. So just wanted to set the stage for that and thank VCU for offering to be the representatives from the higher ed community on this particular call, and look forward to seeing you all on future calls. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Okay, so perfect. So I think in the next one we're going to get into is just some introductions on who you'll be hearing from today. So as most of you know, I'm Leighton Spencer. I work on the Google for Education, specifically higher ed team here at Google. And then I'm primarily focused on Workspace for Education. I'm also joined here by my technical counterpart, Ken Matthews, who's actually going to be running us through the ins and the outs of the demo, and what we'll be kind of looking towards the different options of how you can actually deploy and then manage licensing. And then we're joined by Connie and Amanda from VCU. And Connie and Amanda, feel free to unmute and introduce yourselves and kind of give a little background on your role and responsibilities as well.
Hi, I'm Connie Wetstein. I'm Director of Collaboration Services at VCU. And what that means is we manage, our team of 4 manages all things Google. VCU is an all Google school, so our students, faculty, and staff all are Google Workspace for Education. And we manage a few other security tools as well, but that's what our team does. Amanda?
Hi, I'm Amanda Carlson, and Connie's a deputy director. I work right underneath her, and I do a lot of our technical stuff, and I'll be talking later about how we deploy the licenses.
Perfect. No, thank you both. And thank you again for your willingness to kind of be showcased today and share kind of the deployment strategy that you all have and how that is iterated over time as well. So then up next, we're actually just going to jump right into the content of kind of the demo of the provisioning options that you have. So this is where I'm going to pass it back over to Ken Matthews, who's going to run us through a couple different variations. Ken, I see you have some slides here as well. Do you want me to run through those first, or do we want to just jump right into the demo?
Yeah, let's run through those real quick.
Okay.
Just general overview slides before we jump into the actual physical process of going through all these tools. I wanted to just give a brief overview. This is in the provisioning licensing guide that we have shared out prior to this call. The admin console, you're going to have essentially 2 options. You have the ability to automatically assign by OU, and you can also jump into manual assignment either individually, or thank you, Leighton, either individually or in bulk. There is a limitation on the bulk process in terms of uploads and downloads. We're looking at 200 users at a pop, so you're going to want to do that multiple times if you're dealing with users over that amount. And this assignment will essentially apply to all standard teaching and learning and plus licenses for your Workspace user accounts. Some Google native options that we have, Google Cloud Directory Sync, and you're probably using that to sync from Active Directory. The options are available within that. I'll show you essentially a high-level overview of how that looks. And then we can also dig into the Enterprise Licensing Manager API. I'm just going to show you the API Explorer, dig into that at a high level. And then finally, rounding it out with third-party GAM. I mentioned dynamic groups. This is a standard and plus feature. The reason why I mentioned dynamic groups is you have the ability to essentially, by attribute, user attribute within the admin console, create automatic membership of a particular group, and you can actually expose that group within GAM to be able to sync the licenses using the GAM command. You can create a scheduled task if you're on Windows to essentially sync that. Next slide. Some best practices just to go over before we jump into this. Workspace administrators are the only ones that have the option to be able to do this. We've gone over many options here, so you probably would want to stick with one option going forward. Obviously, if you want to jump in really quickly, you can use the manual option to assign and remove licenses as you see fit. And you definitely want to segregate your suspended users to a separate OU or group so that you do not license those users. You'll see how that plays out in a minute when I share. Go ahead and you can stop presenting and I'll share my slide and we'll jump into this demo. Okay. Let me just rearrange my windows real quickly. Thumbs up that everybody can see my admin console screen. Great. Okay, so when we're dealing with, I'm going to jump into the automatic assignment first. When we're dealing with licensing, all of it is going to be under the billing section. Let's see if I have to copy. No, good. I'm still signed in, so my my service is still operational. So under subscriptions, you're going to get a general overview of all the licenses you have. So as you can see here, we have the free licenses of Fundamental, Android. I have some Chrome licenses. I have a separate SKU, Chrome Search Platform. I'm going to use that so you can see some of the gotchas with automatic license assignments. And then I have the Education Plus, the student licensing, and then the staff licensing. Staff is the one that's actually called out here. And then, of course, we have, just for purposes of this demonstration, I've added some teaching and learning. You may find that you want to add some teaching and learning on top of your Plus or your standard licensing. That option is available to you. You can dig into any of these specifics by clicking directly onto this. You're going to see some more information. It's all going to give you information in terms of where you can assign the licenses either individually or in bulk, or what we're going to go to first is the managing license information, which is just essentially going to take you under billing license settings. Here's where you're going to see where the automatic licensing by OU over on this side comes into play. First, you may say to yourself, you know what, I want to license everybody. I have enough licenses, I can do that. Or maybe you don't know you have enough licenses, you don't have a full idea of all the number of users you have, and you just want to try it out. It is worth noting that if you have more users than licenses, for instance, I do for this teaching and learning, I have the settings that are showing for the root OU up top here. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to have the options to turn it on or off. I want to turn this on for the entire domain at the root OU level. And when I do, I'm going to notice, since I only have 15 licenses, I'm going to get a failure at the bottom here. So at this point, I'm probably going to want to talk to myself and say, hey, let's go in and let's actually get a little bit more granular and go maybe say down into my students and at the graduate level and assign the T&L licenses directly at that level. So for instance, if we were dealing with administration, so staff and faculty, I could click on this particular OU. I could go to the Google Workspace for Education automatic license. I can turn that particular one off, on for staff or on for just students. In this case, I want staff. And when I click override, that's essentially going to override for that root OU. And when you're looking at this actual section again, you're going to get those gray dots that are going to show you where the actual settings are taking place. I have one at the administration OU and the KMA2 or the root OU level. It is also worth noting that this is going to populate all the way down into any sub-OUs underneath that. It's going to happen at the root OU. It's also going to happen at the sub-OU level and any OUs that are underneath that. I could, if I wanted to, go in here and decide to override or inherit permissions from that particular setting if I want to. If there is an override available, anything that you do at the top level domain above that is not going to populate down. That override is going to take place. So no changes will be made place. So if, for instance, in this particular instance, if I had an override at finance and I made some changes to administration, finance would stay the same. To see how that works, I can also go back into the administration. I can click inherit to inherit the permissions from the root OU again. And that information would be reflected underneath here. You'll see inherited from the root OU. It is important to note here that this does not remove the licensing from my users. If I go back into my subscriptions, you're going to see that I still have 26 assigned for that particular subscription. So in this case, if I wanted to remove those licenses, this is where we're going to start to get into the manual assignment. I can click on this particular URL from this card here, and that'll take me to the users that are assigned with that license. I'll automatically be pre-populated with the filter up top here, and I can choose to remove those licenses clicking on individual users or clicking on the entirety of all of them. and then I can choose more, and I can choose to remove those particular licenses. The other thing to note is I can also go in here and I can select, if I can remove this filter here, I can select showing all users here. I can choose to select a particular OU, for instance. Let's go down into my undergraduate level, go a little bit further and say maybe all of my freshmen. And I can choose to select all of these users, or again, any individual users that I choose, and then that'll open up the assign licenses. And this is where I can start to assign licenses based on any OUs that I specify, based on any search parameters and filters that I specify. You'll notice here that I have the options in this little drop-down menu to choose between either the student or the staff licenses. If for whatever reason I wanted to remove licenses, I can do the same thing. I'm going to filter down here by assign licenses for the cloud search platform, so I can show you that when you have the automatic assignment already set up for a particular OU, if I wanted to remove that for any of these users, I'm not going to be able to do that. It's going to be essentially grayed out. I can't click on here, and then you're going to see a little blurb here at the bottom that says why. It's basically based on the automatic assignment license. This way, if you wanted to remove these licenses for this particular SKU, for instance, you'd have to go back into those settings for the automatic licensing, turn that off, and then you can go back and remove the licenses. You're also going to see the same behavior when you drill into a particular user. So when I'm looking at this particular user, I can scroll down into the license card here, and I can see that there are a number of licenses assigned. And when I'm in this particular user, I can choose to select here, and I can turn that assignment on for any of the SKUs that I specify. I can choose to do the teaching and learning upgrade. But for this particular one, which is automatically assigned, as you'll see here, it's going to be grayed out. I cannot do that. I also cannot do that for any of the free licensing or the site licensing that's available within the Workspace for Education accounts. Moving on to that, there's also the ability to bulk update your users. So when we're dealing with bulk updating users, I'm going to particularly focus on my graduate level users. I only have 2 because I don't want to spend a lot of time having you watch the bulk update process go about. But I can select these users here, and then I can choose to, I'm sorry, not select these users. I can choose to download these users here. And that's going to open up the option to be able to download this information to the CSV. I'm only going to worry about the filtered current list of filtered users here. And then I'm going to select all user info columns and currently selected columns here so that I get that particular licensing column that I need to be able to update that into the users that I specify. I download that information. I can see here in the task card that it's going to be running. Once that's done, I can open up that Google Sheet. And I can then scroll down over to the actual item that I'm going to be updating. And in this case, this is the new license upload only. And this is where I'm going to ask myself, hey, where do I find this information in terms of the SKU IDs? I can see the SKU ID is already applied here, but I don't know what that means because it's just a random number set. Well, when you go into this particular resource here under the developers.google guide and the Enterprise License Manager API, which we'll get into a little bit later, you're going to see under products and SKUs all the available SKUs that are for the education SKUs. These are also going to be surfaced in our licensing provisioning guide. In this particular instance, I just want to copy this teaching and learning education upgrade. I'm going to go back to my user list. And I'm going to pop that into this particular column. And then I essentially just quickly do some formatting. I essentially can download this information directly into a CSV file right here. I already had one pre-populated, so I'll just save over that. And then I'm going to go back into my user console, and I'm just going to bulk update those users. I'm going to choose right here, bulk update users, and then I have the various amounts of options available. I can download a blank CSV to upload, or I can just attach the CSV file that I wanted. Click open there, it's now attached, and then I can upload that information, and then the taskbar is going to run, and it's going to tell me when it's complete, and then it's going to give me a log of those details. Once it's complete, and I see no errors are run, I can go back and I can either filter at the user list, or I can go actually into the billing section and see that there are 2 assigned for those particular users. That is essentially everything that is available for the admin console. Next, we're going to move into GCDS. Just want to make sure that I share this out real quick. So give me 1 second so I can share this new field. So you can see my GCDS instance. Looks like everything is good on your end, so I'm going to go ahead. So this is Google Cloud Directory Sync. I'm running on a Windows environment. Some of you may be running on Linux. It's going to be a similar UI. First, you're going to want to stop here at the general settings, and you're going to want to make sure that you have licenses selected to be able to open up that settings to be able to add or essentially update any search rules that you need to be able to sync from one side to the next. Once that's done, you're going to see this licensing card. You can open that up. You're going to want to choose an email address attribute. I used user principal name in this instance only because I don't have Exchange in my environment, so the mail attribute won't actually show me anything. But we do recommend using the mail attribute for most environments. So you would just put that email attribute directly into here. And then, of course, you would add your rule. I've already created a rule for you in the interest of time. I'm doing this LDAP query on a simple sync here to a group. Essentially, this LDAP query is asking to surface all users that are a member of a specific group. You're also going to see that I've taken it essentially from this LDAP query example right here. And then I've chosen, we're going to choose to assign the license to Google domain users. And you have a myriad of options here that you can choose from. And in this particular instance, I am going to want to choose Education Plus Staff. I also have the option to remove this license from any Google domain users that don't match this rule. I'd be careful with this option because you might remove licenses from users that need it. So in my particular instance, I'm not going to check this because I want to make sure that any previously assigned licenses are there. And then, of course, we're going to test the LDAP query to make sure that that query is working, and it's going to surface some information in terms of the users that are actually going to get this particular SKU. You also are able to look under the SKU management, and you can see a number of different SKUs that are available that come default with the installation of GCDS. You can also choose to remove these or add these. So if you only wanted to specifically focus on the educational ones, you could do that so you don't see all of these that are available to you. And then finally, you're going to close this out with the sync option, and you're going to want to simulate a quick sync to make sure that everything is running. You can clear the cache if you want. Once that analysis is run, you can scroll down to the bottom, and you can see that there are 2 local users with licenses that will be added to my Google domain. We're going to create these users. We're not going to modify or delete or anything like that. And there's the information in terms of the users that are going to be added. And that's essentially all that you would need to do. Obviously, you're probably going to have a much more complex environment in your environments, but in terms of the search rules and things like that. But at a high level, this is what all you would need to do in terms of creating the search rules to be able to sync this information over. Moving on, I'm just going to stop presenting real quick and go back so that I can show you the Enterprise Licensing Manager. Okay. So the next option would be the Enterprise Licensing Manager. And the reason why I wanted to show you this because it's kind of neat to be able to use the Enterprise or the API Explorer to be able to show all the various information that these APIs can do. It's a good place to start. It'll give you a JSON, a result, or something that you can use for your scripting analysis. And this is a good reference in terms of all the available parameters and fields that are available. In this particular instance, it's going to be under developers. We're looking at the admin SDK in this particular Enterprise Licensing Manager API. We have an overview that shows you all the fields and all of the various methods that you need to be able to get this information and the resources that are being used. We have, in this particular option, the option to delete, which means revoking the license. You can get licenses that are assigned to a specific user. You can list for a specific product. You can add a license using the insert method. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to want to, list for a specific product and SKU. And this is where you're going to use any method over here that you're clicking on. It's going to open up this API Explorer. This one's really simple. All we need to do is go back over to this resource for the products and SKUs. We're going to copy over the education SKU product ID. We're going to pop that into the product ID field or string. Then we're going to go back over and we're going to copy over the SKU ID. I'm going to be interested in the staff licenses because I just want to list all the licenses that have been previously assigned. And then for the customer ID, that's essentially your domain. And my domain is cayman2.com. And you're going to execute it. You're going to give access to this API, and you're going to see the JSON return to give you all of the information in terms of, in this particular instance, the query that I'm running is all of the Workspace for Education staff users that are licensed within my domain. I can then take this information and drop it into an app script or anything like that that I need if I was, or give it to my developer to be able to develop a solution using the APIs to be able to update licensing as I see fit. And then finally, we're going to get into the third-party option, which is GAM. But before I jump into that, I want to show how you can essentially create groups, in this particular instance, a dynamic group, which again is specific to standard and plus SKUs. This opens up some automation in terms of membership. So it is important to note that for every user, there are a number of attributes or fields. I'll take this user specifically. And under the user information, most of this information is going to be exposed to be used for a cell query within a dynamic group. For the purposes of this demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the add a type of employee. I've actually pre-populated a number of users within here with the type of employee of student. And when I go back to my groups, and if I want to create that group, I'm going to see I've already pre-populated the group here, but I'm going to quickly just show you how that cell query works by creating another dynamic group. Once you click on creating dynamic group, you have a number of conditions. And here are all the conditions that are exposed to be able to use, and these are all based on those attributes that I showed you. In this particular instance, I am interested in organizations.description, which maps to that field that I showed you. And we have the option to equals or equals without, if I want to ignore any case values, I just want to use just a general word value there. And I'm going to put in student here. I can also have the option to add even more conditions. So if I wanted to add faculty here, or if I wanted to add TAs or graduates, anything like that, to be able to surface that information, I can. And then I can, of course, exclude suspended users, which might come in handy if you didn't actually have the time to be able to move those users into their separate user groups. Then you have the option to preview. Once that is previewed, you'll see all the various users that this particular group membership will apply to. You'll also see the actual cell query that's going to be up at the top here. You can see all the information that I put in here. We're looking at this order description of student and user suspended is false. And then you can create that dynamic group. And then the benefit of this would be to take this dynamic group and use GAM to be able to sync that information. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to, just so I don't have to pause this and go back into my GAM instance, I'm just going to pop in a real simple GAM command that you can use into the chat window. And this will essentially sync the student licenses, that's the SKU for the student licenses, to this dynamic group that I created. And you can run that on a scheduled task. So the automatic membership will already be populated based on that attribute. All those users will be in there, and then say every night or every couple of days or every week you can sync based on the licensing information. And I'm just going to pop quickly out to be able to run that sync so you'll actually see that information. Just going to quickly hit enter on my command here, my other computer. And that essentially will populate down into the sync those users into that group. And when those users are synced over, it seems that I'm actually getting an error message, but that's okay. When those users are synced over, you're going to see that these particular users will then be reflected within the subscriptions section. There will be Education Plus. Right now it's 0 assigned, but when that's synced over, it's going to take a few minutes to populate. It'll actually populate over into there, and that can be run on a scheduled task basis, like I mentioned. And that's pretty much it for all of the various options that you have available. I know that there's a number of questions in the Q&A. I'll look over those, and I'll kick it over to the next presenter.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ken, for running through all of that. And yeah, we can get to the Q&A towards the end of the call as well. But let me just reshare my screen. And it is now my pleasure to introduce both Connie and Amanda back to the screen, as we are going to hear from them specifically on how VCU actually went about adding their licensing, how they are currently managing it, and kind of what that looked like over time. So definitely appreciate you all sharing your story here, Connie and Amanda. But I'll pass it over to you just to give a brief explanation of how you've gone about deploying licensing for Education Plus, and then how your methods have kind of evolved over time as well.
Okay. I just want to, a couple of things, say that this partnership with Internet2, we're certainly excited about. When we purchased our licenses, we did not have this partnership, and our procurement people will be really, really pleased. It's going to make our lives a lot easier. So we're really happy about that. Also, just speak to for a minute about why we went with the enterprise, and we are legacy. So we really wanted to continue the Google Meet advanced features. The investigation tool was big, and we use it heavily. We've resolved some potential security breaches. We definitely deal with phishing scams quickly. And also, as we move to Canvas this fall, we wanted the unlimited originality reports with Google Assignments. We've just introduced that. And another big key for us was the Google Workspace Migrate tool. Amanda can speak a little bit more about how we lived in 2 domains and now we are in 1. But one of the decisions we had to make was, initially we felt like we needed enough licenses for every person, but using the iPads numbers, we realized that, we get a bank of licenses, and we realized that we have in higher ed, of course, a lot of departmental accounts, a lot of affiliates, a lot of contractors. So our faculty and staff all get the enterprise license, and that still leaves a bank of licenses for special requests, hourly workers, department accounts that actually need the features. And so once we decided who was going to get the license, then we did have to figure out how to deploy those. And that's where Amanda comes in.
Yeah, so we started out, like Connie said, in 2 separate domains. We had our faculty staff in one domain and our students in another. So we started out with just deploying our employee licenses within our faculty staff domain, since that was going to be our official domain for everyone. So we started that we would digest our Google logs for our creates and our suspends, and for any unsuspends and activations, and we assign those licenses then using GAM and information from our LDAP server to kind of figure out who those people were and if we were going to assign those licenses. And that, worked okay. It became a little bit cumbersome for us over time, and then we ended up a couple of times with some errors in scripting, and our licenses we weren't able to assign any more licenses because we had reached our max, even though we shouldn't have reached our max. So we had some suspended accounts that had licenses and things that shouldn't have. And so we decided that we would move over to the Google Cloud Directory sync at the point that we moved our students over. So we rolled along with the GAM and kind of manually assigning licenses for a while, and then moved over to the GCDS to assign both student and employee licenses. And so that, like Ken had said, we query our LDAP server and for employees, and then we assign the employee license, and we query for students and assign the student license. And we have some few manual exceptions that we add to our exclusions in the GCDS, so it doesn't remove the license. And we also remove those licenses if they don't match the rules. So if someone gets suspended or changes their role, which happens, frequently in higher ed, we remove those licenses from those users and free them up for us. So our goal, though, is to use our identity access management system that has hooks into Google, our Google tenant, so they provision our license, or they provision our accounts, and they suspend our accounts, and they populate Google groups, and they do other things with our Google tenants. So it makes sense for us, like when an account gets created, for it to automatically just assign that a license, depending on their role, or not assign a license if they're like an affiliate or a generic account. So that's where we're headed. We're not quite there yet. So the GCDS is working really well for us right now. And once we move to that identity access management system and using the APIs to assign the licenses, we should be doing it in almost real time.
No, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing, Amanda and Connie. And just one quick question I actually had for you, and either one of you can potentially answer this, is when you were first getting started, what was like one piece of information or advice that you'd wish you'd had that would be beneficial to others on the call today?
I could probably speak to that. I just think is figuring out kind of the best way, or trying to figure out how to or who to assign licenses to, and really looking at your big picture first, how many licenses you have, who you really want to have them, and really laying that out, so you have an idea of how you want to do it, and then picking your solution really based on that, and looking at how, if you have, we don't populate a lot of attributes in Google, so dynamic groups wouldn't work for us, so but it may work for someone else if that's something that they do. So really looking at your big picture first, and kind of narrowing it down, and then picking a solution or trying a solution and deploying it, and then going from there. So we've kind of evolved from what we started from, and then and we have a picture of where we're going, and that's that's kind of been our timeline, or our path along there. So to do that would be probably the best, is to lay out your plan.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you again for jumping on here, sharing your guys' story. We really appreciate it. I'm hoping that the others also find this beneficial, because I know I have. And then I think what we'll do next is, I know we have about, 5 minutes officially scheduled, but we have some kind of overage time built in as well, to jump into Q&A. So Ken, I'll kind of read off the Q&A kind of questions we got through the chat, but then again, anyone else, feel free to unmute and just kind of ask away, because we're happy to answer these live as well. But the first one that we have is from Philip at NYU. And the question is, will you initially support provisioning via third-party IDM solutions, most notably SailPoint? So I'll pass that one over to Ken.
I would want to do a little bit more research into this, but where my mind goes to is, I'd want to talk to SailPoint about integrations with the admin directory API in terms of the provisioning. I do notice, just in a quick Google search, that there are some GCP and SailPoint integrations that are available, so I'd want to dig into that as well. But I don't see why not, based on those the open APIs, that we wouldn't be able to work with that particular third party.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ken. And then I think the next one we have is from Michael Porter over at University of Delaware. Many options in Google Workspace can be controlled by group membership instead of OU membership. Given the GAM demo, I assume this will not, that this is not the case with these licenses.
Yeah, I'm happy to, if you can expand a little bit in terms of what you meant by the last statement there, just so I understand where the limitations are.
Sure. Like for instance, I can assign if I want to give a small group of people access to YouTube, I can just put them in a Google group, and then I can control access to YouTube via Google group membership instead of OU. We find that OUs don't really work very well for us because we just have too many cross cases going on.
Well, yeah, the licensing is not going to be exposed by group directly within the API, so you'd have to use the GAM to be able to sync those licenses. You can sync by group. I will note that one of the newer features of the group, I didn't show it in the demo, but you have the option to be able to label it as a security group, which takes away the option for being a mailing group. Once you've labeled it as a security group, you can't go back. It's just solely for access. And where that comes into handy is, for instance, with the age-based settings that are coming up. That will essentially expose that group for those particular settings and other settings throughout the admin console. Once that security group label is applied, you can use that group for those access permissions, with the benefit of using that automatic membership based on the entry. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Perfect. So I think that those were the only two that we got through the Q&A. But I know we have some time kind of remaining, so we're kind of just opening up to any general questions that you have for Ken or the VCU team about deployment and management of licensing.
Ken, as part of this, do we have storage considerations as well? So if you have an affiliate, they may have a different data storage limits than a staff or faculty. How does that work in this conversation?
Yeah, so the storage tooling that's going to be coming end of the year, beginning of end of 2021, beginning of 2022, that particular tooling will allow you to set the storage limits by OU, by group, or at the individual level. It is worth noting that that's going to be available with fundamentals, and it's going to be the same with the standard and the plus. The TNL is more of an add-on license, so that doesn't really apply other than giving you more storage for a license. But the only other thing is, with the plus, you're getting more storage as well. With the teaching and learning with the plus, you're getting more storage with those purchases.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we got one more as well. It's from Philip, and it is the tool similar to GCDS that uses API calls rather than LDAP calls?
In terms of provisioning, you would want to look at the admin directory API.
Okay.
For licenses, it would be the Enterprise License Manager API, which I showed.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, excellent. So we kind of have some additional time. Feel free to kind of ask away. If not, I know this is originally kind of earmarked for 45 minutes, so we can end right on time. Again, if you have any individuals who potentially wanted to attend and missed this, this was recorded. We'll actually be posting kind of the recording online as well. So it will be both on the Internet 2 kind of blog post where we kind of forwarded a lot of you to kind of sign up and register. And it will also be posted on YouTube. So we'll be sure to kind of share that across in a couple different ways. But if nothing else, I think thank you again for your overall kind of participation in this. Thanks for coming. Thanks for asking these great questions. Thank you again, Connie and Amanda, for participating as well. And then thanks, Ken, for kind of running us through that demo. And I just saw a note here as well from Tara. Any questions on the Net Plus agreement itself, don't hesitate to email them at netplus@internet2.edu. But appreciate it again. And hopefully we'll see you all next week around the same time as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again, everyone.
Thanks, Leighton.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hey, Leighton, this is Rob Parrish. Are these videos going to be made available afterwards?
Yes, yes, they are. They'll be recorded and then posted on both the Internet 2 kind of website blog post and then also on YouTube.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.